The storm came fast that night, roaring over the quiet valley like an angry beast. Rain hammered the rooftops. Lightning flashed across the sky and the wind howled through the rusted fences. Most people in the border town had already locked their doors and gone to sleep. But one man was still awake, John Keller, a mechanic who lived alone at the edge of town. John was closing the old doors of his workshop when he heard it, a soft, strange sound between the gusts of wind. At first he thought it was just the wind moving through the metal pipes. But then he heard it again, clearer this time. It was a cry, a small shaking voice full of fear and pain. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out into the rain. "Hello?" he called. His boots sank into the mud as he walked around the side of his garage. The cry came again, this time from behind his old pickup truck. When the beam of light swept under the truck, John froze. A small figure crouched there, soaked to the bone, her skin shining faintly even in the dark. Not human skin. It was pale silver like moonlight trapped in water. Her eyes were large and glowing faint blue. She was trembling, clutching a torn piece of cloth around her shoulders. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the rain. "Please, be my dad. I'll behave." John's heart stopped for a second. He lowered the flashlight and crouched slowly. Hey, it's okay," he said softly. "You're freezing. Come on out," but she didn't move. She looked terrified, like a cornered animal. Her small fingers dug into the wet ground. John saw the bruises on her arms and the fear in her eyes, and something inside him twisted. "I won't hurt you," he said again. "You're safe here." The girl looked at him for a long moment, rain dripping from her silver hair. Then she slowly crawled out. She was no older than 10. Her clothes were torn and covered in mud. Around her neck hung a small pendant that glowed weakly. It looked like alien tech, but damaged. John took off his jacket and wrapped it around her small shoulders. "Let's get you inside before you catch something," he said. She nodded weakly, but didn't speak again. He led her into the workshop where the smell of oil and metal mixed with the warmth of an old space heater. She sat on a stool staring at the floor while John found a towel and an old blanket. "What's your name, kid?" he asked. "Lyra," she whispered. "My stepmother. She told me to go away. Said I wasn't pure." John stopped what he was doing. "Not pure?" Lyra hugged the blanket tighter. "She said I was broken. My father was human. I'm not supposed to exist," the words hit him hard. He'd heard about alien-human unions before. Rare and often hidden. Most of them ended in tragedy. The rich alien families didn't like reminders that they weren't as perfect as they claimed. "So she threw you out?" he asked quietly. Lyra nodded, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "She said if I came back she'd tell the guards to burn me with the waste fire." John clenched his jaw. He'd seen cruelty before, war, greed, corruption. But this was different. This was just a child. He pulled up a chair beside her. "You hungry?" She looked up, surprised. "A little," he smiled. "All right. I've got soup, not fancy alien food, but it'll warm you up." While he heated the pot, Lyra looked around the workshop. Shelves full of old human tools. A dusty photo of a woman smiling beside John, and a small radio playing soft static. When John noticed her looking, he said quietly, "That was my wife. She's gone now." Lyra lowered her head. "I'm sorry," John shrugged. "Me too, but you know, she used to say no one should be alone on a cold night." When the soup was ready, he handed her a cup. She drank it slowly, her hands shaking less with each sip. For the first time, a tiny smile touched her lips. "Thank you," she said softly. John leaned back, sighing. "You don't have anywhere to go, do you?" She shook her head. "No, but I can work. I can help. I'll behave, just please don't make me go." The room went quiet except for the rain. John looked at her, small, scared, unwanted, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. "You can stay," he said finally, "just until we figure things out." Lyra's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yeah," he said, smiling faintly. "But first you need to rest." He guided her to a small bed in the corner, covered her with another blanket, and turned off the lights. For a long time he stood watching her sleep, her silver skin glowing softly in the dark. Outside, the storm began to fade. But in the distance, hidden among the clouds, something mechanical moved. A small drone, red light blinking, scanning the ground below. It had found a heat signature. A human and a small alien child, and it sent a signal into the night, straight toward the mansion she'd run from. The storm wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the valley wrapped in a pale mist. The sun was still hiding behind the clouds, and the roads were covered in puddles. Inside the old mechanic's house, the faint smell of coffee and oil filled the air. John stood by the stove, stirring a small pot of porridge, his rough hands moving slowly, his mind heavy with thoughts of the strange girl sleeping in the next room. He still couldn't forget the way she'd said it. "Please, be my dad." Those words had carved themselves deep into his heart, and now, as the morning light spilled through the cracked window, he realized his quiet life was no longer the same. Lyra woke with a start, blinking at the unfamiliar room. The old wooden ceiling creaked and dust danced in the light. For a second, she looked frightened. Then she saw John sitting nearby, and her shoulders relaxed. "Good morning," he said, voice gentle. "You slept all night. Feel any better?" She nodded slowly. "Yes. It's warm here." Her voice was soft, almost shy. John placed a bowl of porridge in front of her. "Eat up. You look like you haven't had a meal in days." Lyra hesitated for a moment before picking up the spoon. "Thank you, human dad," she said quietly. John froze for a moment, the words catching him off guard. "You don't have to call me that," he said awkwardly, though something about it warmed him inside. Lyra smiled a little. "But I want to," she said. John looked away, pretending to check the radio. It was still crackling with static. The old signal towers had been unreliable since the alien settlements started building their own networks across the region. Humans like him who lived near the border were used to interference. But he couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be listening. He turned back to Lyra. "You said your stepmother threw you out. You got anyone else? Any family?" Lyra shook her head. "My real father was human. He worked with machines like you. He died before I was born. My stepmother said he cursed me, said I was half wrong." John sighed. "Half wrong, huh? Well, far as I can see, you're a kid who needs a roof and a meal. That's all that matters." Lyra looked down at her bowl. No one ever said that before. Outside, the wind pushed through the fields. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of engines echoed. Not from any truck John knew. He frowned. The noise faded quickly, but it didn't feel right. After breakfast, Lyra followed John into his workshop. The place was filled with tools, gears, and half-fixed engines. She looked around in wonder, touching the rusted metal with care. "What is this?" she asked, pointing at an old power core. "That's a reactor module," John said. "Used to power the harvesters. Haven't seen one working in years." Lyra knelt beside it, her small fingers tracing the wires. Then she did something that made John blink. She pressed her palm to the core, and the dead lights flickered once weakly. "Hey, how did you—" Lyra quickly pulled her hand back. "Sorry, I didn't mean to break it." "You didn't," John said, eyes wide. "You started it. That thing's been dead since the supply wars." She bit her lip, looking nervous. "Sometimes machines listen to me. My father said it's because of what he gave me, but my stepmother said it's unnatural." John chuckled softly. "Kid, around here, anything that works is a blessing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." For the first time, Lyra laughed, a quiet musical sound that made the cold room feel a little warmer. Hours passed, and she followed John everywhere, asking questions, learning how to use tools, how to clean parts, how to tighten bolts. She was a quick learner, too quick. It was as if machines spoke to her in a secret language only she could understand. As the day went on, John realized how empty his house had been all these years. He hadn't laughed since his wife passed, hadn't spoken much to anyone. But now this strange child filled the silence like sunlight breaking through clouds. By evening, he had fixed up a small cot beside the heater. Lyra looked at it and smiled softly. "It's perfect," she said. Before bed, she whispered, "Thank you for letting me stay. I'll help you with work tomorrow." John nodded. "You just rest. We'll see about work later." As the night settled in, he sat by the window, watching the distant lights over the alien city beyond the hills. He didn't know what kind of trouble he had invited into his home, but he knew one thing. That girl was running from something powerful. He thought about her silver skin, the faint glow that shimmered under her sleeve, and the fear in her eyes when she mentioned her stepmother. Whoever had thrown her out wasn't done yet. John turned off the lamp and looked at the stars through the fogged glass. "We'll keep you safe, kid," he murmured. "No matter what it takes." Outside in the distance, a small drone hovered silently above the tree line, its red eye watching the house. It recorded every heat signal, every movement. Then, without a sound, it turned and vanished into the sky, carrying Lyra's location back to the alien capital. The peace of the shelter wouldn't last long. The hunt had already begun. The next morning came with an eerie calm. The storm clouds had drifted away, leaving behind a sky too quiet, too still. John stood outside his workshop, wiping his hands on a rag, pretending not to notice how strange the air felt. Birds weren't singing. The wind wasn't moving. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath. Lyra sat nearby, sketching something in the dirt with a small stick. Her silver hair shimmered faintly in the sunlight. She looked peaceful, but John's instincts, the same ones that had kept him alive through years of war and loss, whispered that something was coming. When the distant hum reached his ears, he knew it wasn't imagination. It was low, rhythmic, and heavy, not the sound of a transport truck but of engines in the sky. He glanced up. 3 black shapes cut across the clouds, moving slow and deliberate. Patrol ships. Alien make. John's grip tightened on the rag. Inside the cabin, Lyra suddenly froze, her small body going rigid. "They're here," she whispered. "I can feel them." "How?" he asked quietly. "Their signal," she said, touching her pendant. "They use a frequency to track me. My stepmother had it built into this necklace when I was born, so she'd always know where I was." John cursed under his breath and ripped it off gently. "We'll fix that," he said, walking over to his workbench. He grabbed a small hammer and a signal disruptor chip. "You ever take one of these apart before?" Lyra shook her head. "Then today's lesson," he said, "is how to disappear." Within minutes, the necklace lay open in pieces, its crystal core still glowing faintly. John soldered a few wires, added a patch from an old war drone, and handed it back. "Now it tells them you're 500 miles east," he said with a grin. Lyra looked amazed. "You fooled them?" "Not for long," he said, "but long enough for us to make a plan." They didn't have time to finish breakfast before the first ship landed near the edge of town. The sound of engines made the windows rattle. From the doorway, John watched 3 alien enforcers step out. Tall, armored, their skin pale blue and marked with silver insignias. One of them held a hollow slate with a child's image glowing above it. Lyra gasped. "That's me." John shut the door quietly. "They're doing house-to-house searches," he said. "They'll be here soon." She trembled. "Please don't let them take me." "They'll hurt you too." He looked at her and smiled faintly. "Kid, I've had worse neighbors." He led her through the workshop to the old barn behind it. Inside, under stacks of scrap metal and broken engines, was a narrow door leading to a space he'd used during the last riots, a hidden crawl space built into the ground. "You'll hide here," he said. "Don't come out unless I call you." Lyra shook her head. "No, I don't want to leave you alone." "You won't," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You'll just wait. Sometimes the best way to fight is to stay quiet." She hesitated, but finally nodded. As she climbed down, John noticed her pendant flicker again, not from the signal this time, but from emotion. It pulsed softly in rhythm with her heartbeat. When the doorbell rang, John walked back into the house, calm as stone. The alien enforcers stood at his porch, their armor gleaming. "Human male," one said in a cold, mechanical tone. "A missing child has been traced near this property. Silver-skinned female, age 10. Have you seen her?" John kept his face blank. "I've seen no one but the storm." The leader tilted his head, scanning John's expression. "We will search your land," John shrugged. "You got a warrant for that?" The alien sneered. "Your laws mean nothing here." "Funny," John said, leaning on the doorframe. "They used to say that about invaders, too." The enforcer stepped forward, raising his scanner. "Do not interfere." John's voice hardened. "You step one boot into my home without cause, and you'll regret it." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the alien smirked and motioned to his squad. "He's not worth the report," he said. "We move on." As the ships lifted off again, John exhaled slowly. But the relief didn't last. From the corner of his eye, he saw a glimmer near the tree line, a hovering drone, the same kind that had been watching the night before. It had seen Lyra earlier when she helped him in the workshop. The enforcers might have left, but that drone had recorded everything. He hurried to the barn, opened the hatch, and looked down. "We've got to move," he said. Lyra looked up, eyes wide. "They know? Maybe not yet, but they will soon." He pulled her out, wrapped her in a cloak, and led her toward the back fields. The plan was simple: reach the old tunnels by the cliffs before nightfall. But as they started down the path, Lyra stopped suddenly, clutching her pendant. "What's wrong?" John asked. Her voice trembled. "They're not tracking me anymore." "They're tracking you." John turned sharply, eyes scanning the sky. The drones weren't circling her signal anymore. They were following his workshop, locking on to the modified beacon he had built to protect her. "They swapped the signal," he muttered. "They're baiting us." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "You helped me, and now they'll hurt you." John knelt, his voice calm and steady. "Listen, kid. I've lived my whole life fixing broken things. Maybe this time I can fix more than a machine." Then he took her hand, leading her into the forest as the distant hum of ships grew louder again, echoing across the valley. The hunt wasn't just for Lyra anymore. Now the hunters wanted the human who dared protect her. The sun was falling behind the hills when John and Lyra reached the edge of the forest. The golden light cut through the trees, painting long shadows across the ground. They had walked for hours, mostly in silence, following the path toward an abandoned mining tunnel John remembered from his youth. It wasn't far now, but every sound, every rustle, every broken twig made Lyra flinch. John kept his voice low. "Stay close, kid. We'll rest inside the old shaft once it's dark. No one comes near it anymore." Lyra nodded, clutching the worn cloak around her shoulders. Her pendant had stopped glowing completely since he'd scrambled its signal, but her strange gift, the way she could sense energy, told her they weren't alone. "They're nearby," she whispered. 2, maybe 3 ships searching. John didn't need her alien senses to know she was right. He'd seen the faint blue lights in the sky moments ago, drones sweeping the forest. His gut twisted, the same feeling he used to get before an ambush. "Keep moving," he said. "If we can reach the old tunnel before dark, we've got a chance." But before they could take another step, the forest erupted in sound, engines roaring, trees shaking. From above, spotlights burst through the leaves. "Down!" John shouted, pulling Lyra behind a fallen log. The lights scanned the area, and then a metallic voice echoed through a speaker. "Halt. By order of the House of Selene, surrender the hybrid child. Any resistance will result in termination." Lyra trembled. "It's them, my stepmother's guards." John looked at her, terrified, shivering, yet still trying to be brave, and made a decision that would change both their lives. He whispered, "Stay hidden. No matter what happens, you don't move." Before she could protest, he rose from cover and stepped into the light. Rainwater still clung to his jacket, and his boots sank into the mud as he stared up at the hovering patrol craft. The side hatch opened, and 3 enforcers descended, weapons drawn. Their armor gleamed black and silver, bearing the crest of the alien noble house. The leader, a tall figure with a narrow mask, stepped forward. "You are John Keller, human mechanic of Sector 12. You are harboring a fugitive asset belonging to the Selene family. Hand her over." John crossed his arms. "She's not an asset. She's a child." The leader tilted his head. "An abomination born of impurity. You cannot protect what should not exist," John smirked. "Funny. I've heard nobles say that about humans, too." One of the soldiers raised his weapon. "Careful, human." John's tone stayed calm. "You want to search the area? Fine. But if you take one step toward her, you'll regret it." The leader sneered, motioning for his men to spread out. "Search everything. If the hybrid is here, bring her alive." As the guards moved past him, John's hand slipped behind his belt. Not to reach for a gun, but for a small device he had built years ago. It looked like a broken radio, but inside was a magnetic pulse coil. He had used it to disable faulty drones. It wasn't powerful enough to destroy a ship, but it could knock out weapons for a few seconds. He waited until one of the soldiers stepped near the log where Lyra hid. Then he pressed the trigger. The air cracked with a sharp electric pulse. Sparks flew. The soldier's armor lights blinked and died. "What?" one shouted. John moved fast. He swung a metal wrench from his belt, striking the nearest enforcer across the chest. The soldier fell back with a grunt, his armor hissing from the EMP shock. Lyra crawled out, panic in her eyes. "Dad, run, Lyra!" John yelled. "Go!" But instead of running, she raised her small hands, and for a moment, the air around her shimmered. The ground beneath the soldiers glowed faint blue, and suddenly roots burst through the soil, wrapping around their legs like living ropes. The soldiers struggled, shocked. Lyra's pendant lit up again, brighter than before. John stared. "Kid, what did you just do?" "I don't know," she gasped. "It just happened." The lead enforcer growled, ripping free. "Enough, you'll pay for this, human." He raised his blaster, but before he could fire, John hurled the wrench, knocking the weapon aside. It discharged into a tree, setting it ablaze. "Not today," John muttered. Lyra's energy flickered out. She stumbled, drained. John caught her before she fell. The ship above began to descend again, its weapons charging. "Go!" he shouted, running toward the cliffs with Lyra in his arms. Bolts of plasma struck the ground behind them, lighting the forest on fire. They reached the rocky slope just as the ship's searchlights swept over them again. John dove behind a boulder, shielding Lyra. Then suddenly a thunderous boom echoed through the valley, a blast from another direction. A second ship appeared in the sky, this one painted in military gray, bearing no alien marks. Human-made. It fired a countershot, striking the enforcer's vessel and forcing it to retreat. John stared, stunned, as the new craft hovered above them. A deep voice came through the speakers. "This is Captain Reeve of the Free Frontier. We've been tracking that girl for weeks. If you want her to live, come with us." John looked down at Lyra. Her eyes were half open, filled with exhaustion and fear. He didn't trust strangers, not after all he'd seen, but he knew one thing: staying here meant death. He nodded toward the sky. "All right, Captain," he said under his breath. "You've got our attention." As the ship lowered a beam of light around them, Lyra clung to him tightly. "Are we safe now?" she whispered. John looked up at the fiery sky where the alien ship had fled and answered quietly, "Not yet, kid. But we're getting there." And as they vanished into the beam, the burning forest behind them whispered of war. A war that neither human nor alien could stop once it began. High above the burning forest, the alien flagship floated like a black moon, cold, silent, and deadly. Inside, Lady Selene stood before a large holographic window, watching the flames spread below. Her silver robes shimmered faintly under the light of the stars, but her eyes were like ice. She wasn't angry. Not yet. Selene rarely wasted emotion, but when her enforcer's trembling voice echoed through the intercom, "My lady, the child escaped, aided by a human mechanic." The calm mask cracked. Her long, delicate fingers tightened on the edge of her chair. "A human?" she whispered, as if the word itself was poison. "You're telling me that a filthy border rat is keeping my husband's mistake alive?" "Yes, my lady," the soldier stammered. They were rescued by an unidentified vessel, possibly human-made. Selene smiled, not with amusement but with cold satisfaction. "Good," she said. "Let them run. I want to know who dares defy me." Behind her, a younger noble approached, her advisor pale and nervous. "My lady, the council already warned." "Silent," she hissed. "That half-blood stain carries my family's mark. As long as she breathes, she disgraces me. I will not rest until her heart stops beating." She turned back to the window, her reflection merging with the stars. "Send the bounty," she ordered. "Every tracker, every mercenary across the sector. I want the human captured alive. Let the girl watch him die." Down below, far from the alien fleet, John and Lyra sat inside the Free Frontier ship, surrounded by humming consoles and blinking lights. The ship's interior was old but well-maintained. Human tech, battle-worn and patched together by scavengers and rebels. Captain Reeve stood near the controls, a scar running down his left cheek. His voice was rough but calm. "You're lucky we found you when we did. Those alien nobles don't show mercy." John gave a tired nod. "Thanks for the lift. But I didn't ask to join anyone's war." Reeve smirked. "You already did, friend. The moment you took that girl in." Lyra sat beside them, her eyes wide as she stared at the stars through the viewport. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. Reeve replied, "To Haven, a free port where humans and some alien refugees live off the grid. No noble family can reach you there." Lyra's small smile faded. "My stepmother can reach anywhere," she whispered. John frowned. "Not if we stay smart. I'll fix that transponder you gave me. We'll keep moving, change ships if we have to." But even as he spoke, a warning alarm sounded. The ship shook slightly. Reeve cursed. "What the—" "We've been tagged." John rushed to the console. Tagged? How? Reeve pointed to the screen at a pulsing red icon. Your jacket, he said grimly. It's carrying a beacon. They've been tracking you since the forest. John ripped off the jacket, throwing it to the floor. Can you jam it? Trying, Reeve said, fingers flying over the controls. But it's too late. They're already here. Outside, 2 smaller ships broke through the clouds. Sleek alien interceptors painted in the colors of House Selene. Their engines screamed as they descended, firing warning shots across the hull. Brace yourselves, Reeve yelled. The Free Frontier ship swerved, narrowly avoiding the blasts. The sky lit up in flashes of blue plasma. John grabbed the co-pilot's seat, helping stabilize the ship. Lyra held onto the armrest, her pendant flickering wildly as if reacting to the danger. They won't stop, she said, eyes glowing faintly. She's not after me anymore. She's after you. John looked at her. Then she's going to be disappointed. Reeve pulled hard on the controls, sending the ship into a dive toward the canyon below. Plasma fire tore through the clouds. We can lose them in the ravine, he shouted. But one of the interceptors hit them before they reached cover. The blast rocked the cabin, sending sparks across the panels. The ship's alarm screamed. Lyra fell forward, hitting the floor. Her pendant cracked down the middle, releasing a sharp burst of light that filled the cabin for a second. John picked her up. You okay? She nodded weakly, clutching the broken pendant. It hurts, but I can still feel them. Reeve struggled to regain control. We can make a crash landing in the outer fields, he grunted.
Hang on!
The ship slammed through the trees, sliding through mud and debris before finally stopping with a violent jolt. Smoke poured from the engines. John was the first to move. He kicked the emergency door open, helping Lyra out. The forest around them was quiet again. Too quiet. Reeve stumbled behind them, blood trickling from a cut on his temple. We need to move. They'll send ground troops next. But before they could take another step, a holographic projection appeared above the wreck. Lady Selene's face, perfect and cold. John Keller, her voice echoed. I must admit you've caused quite the spectacle. My soldiers speak highly of your defiance. I almost respect it, John clenched his fists. If you're looking for your daughter, she's done being your property. Selene's lips curved in a cruel smile. Daughter? That thing isn't my daughter. It's an experiment that should have been erased long ago. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. Why do you hate me so much? She asked softly. Selene looked directly at her through the projection. Because you remind me of the man who ruined me. With that, the hologram vanished, replaced by the low hum of engines as dropships began descending through the mist. Reeve pulled his weapon. We've got minutes before they reach us. John looked at the forest beyond, calculating their odds. Then he turned to Lyra. You remember how I told you machines listen to you? She nodded hesitantly. He pointed to the wrecked ship. Then it's time you talk to one. Wake her up. Make her fly again. Lyra stared at the smoking wreck. But she's broken. John smiled faintly. So am I. Doesn't mean I stop working. As the first wave of mercenaries landed nearby, Lyra placed her hand on the ship's cracked core. The ground began to hum, lights flickering back to life, answering her touch like they'd been waiting for her all along. And in the cold mist of that alien forest, a new kind of fire began to burn, not from hatred but from hope. From something Selene could never control, her trap had been set. But she was about to learn that humans weren't so easy to cage. The ground trembled as the first wave of alien mercenaries entered the clearing. Dozens of them, helmeted, armored, and carrying glowing plasma rifles, moved through the mist like a mechanical storm. Above, the sound of dropships thundered, shaking the trees. Smoke still curled from the crash site, rising into the pale dawn. John stood at the entrance of the wrecked ship, rifle in hand, his face streaked with soot and blood. Beside him, Captain Reeve checked the power cell of his blaster. You know this is suicide, right? Reeve said grimly. John smirked, sliding another cartridge into his old rifle. Only if we die. If we live, it's strategy. Reeve chuckled under his breath. You've got the same kind of madness I like. Behind them, inside the ship, Lyra knelt by the reactor core. Her hands trembled, glowing faint blue as she touched the broken circuits. She's weak, Lyra whispered. The ship doesn't want to fight anymore. John turned to her, his tone soft but firm. Then remind her why she should. Lyra looked up, eyes glowing brighter now. Why do humans always fight for what they can't win? Because it's not about winning, John said. It's about who we protect. Something in those words lit a fire in her. She pressed her palms against the control panel, and a surge of light spread through the wreck. The entire hull vibrated, plates realigning, circuits humming back to life. For a moment, the ship's dying heart began to beat again. "Here they come," Reeve shouted. Plasma fire lit up the air, tearing through the forest. John ducked behind a piece of metal plating, returning fire with precise, deadly shots. His aim was calm, his movements deliberate. Every pull of the trigger carried years of training, loss, and purpose. Lyra stayed focused, whispering in her strange alien tongue. Sparks floated around her like tiny stars, and the ship responded. The half-dead engine sputtered, then roared back to life. The mercenaries advanced, shouting in their guttural language. Reeve took down 2, then dove behind a log. "We're outnumbered 20-1, he yelled. John reloaded and smirked. "Then let's even the odds." He twisted a valve near the ship's power conduit, overloading the plasma core. "When I say run, you run." Reeve's eyes widened. "You're insane." "Yeah," John said. "But it works." Lyra suddenly screamed as energy poured through her. The glow from her hands turned blinding white. The ship's system synced with her heartbeat. Every console flared to life. And then silence. The mercenaries paused, confused. The forest went still. Even the air felt heavy. Lyra opened her eyes, and they were no longer blue. They were bright white, like lightning captured in glass. "Dad," she whispered, her voice layered with something ancient and powerful. "They hurt you." John froze, realizing what was happening. "Lyra, no. Don't lose control." But it was too late. A wave of energy erupted from her body, expanding outward in a perfect sphere. The ground cracked. The air shimmered. The mercenaries were thrown back, their weapons shorting out in sparks. The forest lit up like a second sunrise. Trees bent under the force. The alien dropships wobbled, alarms blaring as their systems overloaded. Reeve ducked behind a boulder. "What in the—" "She's a reactor." John dropped his rifle and ran toward her, fighting against the pulsing wind. "Lyra, you have to stop. You'll burn yourself out." Tears ran down her glowing cheeks. "I can't stop it." John reached her and wrapped his arms around her small frame, holding her tight even as his skin burned from the energy. "You can. Listen to me. You're not a weapon. You're my daughter." Her trembling slowed. The light around her began to dim, fading to soft blue. Outside, the surviving mercenaries staggered to their feet, dazed and terrified. Their ships were crippled, their armor smoking. One of them managed to speak through the comms. "Fall back. She's not a child. She's a fusion entity." The remaining ships retreated into the clouds, leaving behind wreckage and silence. Lyra collapsed in John's arms, weak but breathing. Her silver skin flickered with faint light. Did we win?" she whispered. John smiled, though his body ached from burns. "Yeah, for now." Reeve approached, scanning the smoldering battlefield. "She just wiped out an entire assault team," he said in disbelief. "You realize what that means?" John looked down at Lyra. "Yeah, it means they'll send more." Reeve sighed. "Then we need to get her far away. She's not safe anywhere near the border." John stood, carrying her gently. "I know, but I promised her a home. And I don't break promises." As they walked toward the forest edge, the dawn broke through the smoke. For the first time in days, the sky was clear. Far above them, Lady Celine's ship watched from orbit, silent and still. On her screen, she replayed the battle footage, the explosion, the pulse, the light. Her eyes widened slightly. "She's awakened." A cruel smile spread across her lips. "Good. Now the galaxy will see what she truly is, and when the humans try to protect her, they'll burn with her." Back on the surface, John glanced at the sleeping child in his arms and whispered, "We'll see about that." He adjusted his grip and kept walking, the smoke curling behind him like ghosts of the war that had just begun. The morning after the battle, the forest was unrecognizable. Smoke hung low between the trees, and the air smelled of burnt metal and damp earth. Broken weapons lay scattered among the ferns, half buried in ash. But in the middle of all that destruction, a quiet sound broke through. A heartbeat, steady and calm. John sat beside the smoldering wreckage of the ship, his arm bandaged, his clothes torn. The rising sun painted gold across his tired face. Beside him, wrapped in a blanket, Lyra slept peacefully for the first time in days. Her skin no longer glowed. It shimmered faintly like moonlight on water. Reeve stood a few feet away, scanning the horizon. No ships on sensors, he said. Looks like they pulled back for now. John nodded without looking up. They'll be back. Yeah, Reeve said, lighting a cigarette. But they'll think twice before sending another squad after that kid. John chuckled softly. She's tougher than she looks. As if hearing him, Lyra stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, soft blue again instead of that blinding white. Dad, are we safe? John smiled faintly. Safe enough for breakfast. She blinked, confused. Breakfast? He pulled out a dented tin can from his pack and opened it with a knife. First rule of survival, he said. If you can eat, you're still alive. And if you're alive, there's hope. Lyra smiled weakly. You always find hope in strange places. That's a human specialty, he said. Reeve laughed under his breath. You two sound like you've done this your whole lives. John glanced at him. Maybe we have. Just didn't know it. They ate in silence for a while, the forest waking around them, birds cautiously returning, light flickering through the smoke. For the first time since he found her, Lyra looked like a child again, not a fugitive or a weapon. When she finished eating, she turned serious. Dad, I felt something yesterday. When I used that power, it was like the machines were listening to me. Like they were afraid. John studied her carefully. You didn't destroy them out of anger, Lyra. You stopped them because you cared. That's the difference between you and your stepmother. Lyra lowered her gaze. She'll never stop, will she? No, John said honestly. But neither will we. By afternoon, they reached the river that divided the forest from the outer plains. The sunlight glittered off the water like glass. Reeve stopped at the bank and turned to John. This is where I leave you, he said. I've got people waiting at Haven who'll help throw Celine's trackers off your trail. John extended his hand. Could have left us in the forest. You didn't, Reeve smirked. You remind me of my old commander. Stubborn, reckless, and too human for his own good. John grinned. He sounds like a great man. He was, Reeve said quietly, then climbed into his shuttle. Before taking off, he looked back at Lyra. Take care of her, old man. She's more than either of you realize. When the shuttle vanished into the clouds, the world fell silent again, just the sound of the river and the wind through the trees. Lyra stepped forward, dipping her fingers into the water. The ripples glowed faintly where she touched them. It's warm, she said softly. John watched her for a long moment. You know, there's a town not far from here. Small place. Farmers, miners, people who don't ask too many questions. We could stay there a while. Lyra looked up at him. You mean, like a home? He nodded. Something like that. I can fix things. You can help me. Maybe we even build a new ship one day. Her face lit up. That same bright smile that reminded him of why he'd saved her in the first place. I'd like that. Weeks passed. The valley slowly healed. Grass grew over the battle scars and the smoke faded from the air. In the small town on the border, a new workshop opened. Keller Repairs, painted in bold white letters. Locals soon learned that the quiet mechanic had taken in a strange, polite alien girl who always wore gloves and smiled at everyone. She fixed toys for children, repaired farm drones, and once in a while, when no one was looking, whispered to the machines. And they worked again. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the hills, John and Lyra sat outside the shop, eating stew and watching the sky turn orange. Do you miss your world? John asked. Lyra thought for a long moment. Not the world, she said softly. Just the parts that could have been good. John nodded. Then we'll build those parts here. She leaned against his arm. Do you think people will ever stop fighting over who's pure and who's not? John smiled sadly. Maybe not. But as long as one human can love one alien kid enough to try, the universe still has a chance. Lyra looked up at the sky, stars just beginning to appear, and whispered, Then maybe one day they'll see us and understand. A gentle breeze passed through the fields, carrying the smell of earth and oil. The night was quiet, peaceful. John stood adjusting the sign on the shop wall. Next to Keller Repairs, he painted 2 small initials with white paint. LK. When he stepped back, Lyra smiled. What's that mean? He winked. It means we're partners. She laughed softly, her eyes glimmering. Okay, Dad. As the stars filled the sky, the camera would pull away. From the workshop, the glowing fields, the human and alien sitting side by side. until they were just two small lights in the endless dark. And somewhere beyond those stars, Lady Selene watched from her throne, her empire trembling not from war, but from fear. Fear of what love had built in the ruins she left behind. Because the legend of the human father and the half-alien child was spreading, one quiet story at a time, and this was only the beginning.